Hey guys, tonight we step straight into the frostbitten, mud-caked boots of a medieval peasant. Your back aches, your fingers are numb, and the sun's gone before you've even noticed it was there. The wind cuts sideways through the thatched walls of your cottage like it's got a grudge. Snowflakes melt in your hair and refreeze at your neckline. Your breath fogs before your eyes as you glance toward home, a squat, crooked hut made of wattle, daub, and prayers. And guess what? You probably won't survive this winter, statistically speaking anyway. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Post your location and the local time in the comments. I love seeing where and when you're listening. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You shove open the creaky wooden door and duck your head inside. The smell hits first. Smoke, sour cabbage, unwashed humans, and a faint chickeny tang. Welcome home. The ceiling is low, just a few feet above your head, and the smoke from the hearth has nowhere good to go. Chimneys are for nobles and churches. You've got a hole in the roof and faith that the wind won't change direction. At the center of the single room squats the hearth, a shallow pit of glowing embers. It's the soul of the home, the one true heater, cooktop, and gathering point. There's no firewood to waste, so you keep it small and close. Dung patties, dried bramble, and the occasional stolen branch keep it alive. You huddle near it, your hands outstretched, watching sparks leap up like tiny souls escaping. On either side of you, your family packs in. The bed, singular, is a wooden frame stuffed with straw, covered in linen or rough wool if you're lucky. Everyone piles in at once. And yes, I mean everyone. Parents, kids, grannies, uncles, the baby, and probably the cat. Not for comfort, though it helps, but because body heat is free. You sleep foot to head, like logs, to make room. Now, you might be thinking, what about the fleas? Oh, they're very much here. Lice, too, and the occasional rat who treats your sleeping form like a subway platform. You scratch, roll over, and pull the blanket tighter. There's no changing your sheets because there are no sheets to change. A trickle of warmth comes not just from the fire, but from the chickens roosting inside. That's right, your feathery livestock live with you during winter. They huddle in the corner, clucking softly, adding both warmth and, well, droppings. Chickens are nature's space heaters with beaks. If you've got a pig, she's outside in the lean-to, but just barely. On especially cruel nights, you might sneak her in too. She's surprisingly good company. Now let's talk clothes, because you're not changing into pajamas. You sleep in what you worked in. A scratchy tunic, maybe a second one if you've got it, breeches tied at the knee, and a wool cloak if it's not being used to plug the window. Socks? If you're nobility. You wrap your feet in rags. You're used to the smell, mostly. The floors are just dirt, packed down, cold and damp. In some places, you've tossed reeds or straw to soak up moisture and other things. These rushes get replaced once in a while, or never. It's basically medieval carpet, and it crunches when you walk across it at night. In the far corner, someone stirs. That's your cousin, up to empty the chamber pot. Indoor plumbing is 4 centuries and several revolutions away, so you squat over a bucket or a hole in the floor. It's too cold to go outside, unless you want your backside to freeze mid-squat. Here's a historical gem for you. Some medieval cottages had windows made not of glass, but of animal horn shaved thin. You let in light, but not the cold. Mostly. Some just had wooden shutters. And let's be real, you usually leave them closed because wind and wolves. Yes, wolves. They're not just fairy tale props. In the harshest winters, starving wolves crept into villages. There's even a story, though historians still argue whether it's myth or memory, about a French village that lost several children to a pack of wolves during a particularly bitter year. And then there's the silence. Once everyone's inside, fire crackling low, the sounds of the world hush. No cars, no hum of street lamps, just the whistle of wind, the creak of beams, and the occasional snore, or sneeze, from your brother who's been ill since October. Medieval medicine's best offer? A poultice made of garlic and goose fat. Sometimes your neighbor stops by to borrow embers, carried home in a covered pot to restart their own fire. Fire sharing was common and dangerous. One dropped pot and poof, there goes half the village. Thatched roofs don't forgive. On lucky nights, you might hear music. Not Spotify, someone plucking a few notes on a homemade lute, or tapping a rhythm with spoons. It's not for fun exactly. It's to remember what warmth felt like. A shared song sung quietly under breath as the wind howls outside. Now here's your quirky tidbit. In parts of northern Europe, some peasants used heated stones, warmed in the fire and wrapped in cloth, to preheat their straw bedding, sort of like a medieval hot water bottle. Just don't forget to wrap it, or you'll wake up with scorched hay and a story you'll regret. Still awake? Good. Let's zoom out for a second. Life in a medieval peasant's cottage isn't about comfort, it's about survival. Every choice, from the livestock you let indoors to the angle of your bed near the hearth, is a strategy. Not a good one, but it works. Just enough. You wake up with a stiff neck, a dry mouth, and someone's icy toes pressed against your shins. It's still dark out, but time doesn't wait. Not for peasants, and especially not in winter. You inch out from the heap of bodies, already shivering before your feet hit the floor. The fire's burned low overnight, just embers now. You nudge them with a stick and add a bit of kindling, praying it catches. No fire means no food, no light, and eventually, no you. The cold bites, hard and personal. Not the poetic kind of cold, but the bone-deep, finger-cracking, can't-feel-my-face cold that medieval peasants fought like it was an enemy with a sword. You wrap your rough-spun cloak tighter and step outside into the hush of a frost-covered morning. Snow clings to the thatch, piled like stiff frosting along the rooftops. Icicles hang from the eaves, gleaming daggers waiting to drop. Your boots, if you're lucky enough to have them, are hard as stone from yesterday's melted slush. No rubber soles, no fleece lining, just leather, stiff with cold, laced with strips of rawhide. You don't walk so much as stomp, just to get blood flowing to your toes again. Now, before you romanticize this into some peaceful winter wonderland, know this. Wool itches. Every layer you own itches. And layering is your only real defense against the cold. Undergarments? Maybe a linen shirt if you're blessed. Over that, a woolen tunic. Then, maybe another tunic. A hood or cowl, heavy woolen stockings, and if you're a fashion-forward farmer, leg bindings called winnegas, wrapped tightly from ankle to knee like makeshift thermal leggings. The trick isn't fashion, it's insulation. And frankly, style points went out the frozen window around November. There's no such thing as changing for the day. You live in your clothes, sleep in them, work in them, occasionally wash them, very occasionally. If it's washing day, you'll break ice on a bucket and curse the saints. And that's assuming you have soap, or time. But hey, at least you're not totally helpless. Medieval peasants had some creative ways to stay warm. One was the hot brick trick, heated by the hearth, then wrapped in cloth and tucked under your bedding or carried under your cloak like a medieval electric blanket. Another? Pee buckets. Yes. Your chamber pot from last night now doubles as hand warmer. Hold it close and don't ask too many questions. Now comes the hard part. Breakfast, if there's any left. You sit near the fire, gnawing on a crust of yesterday's bread, tougher than your uncle's beard. If you're lucky, there's porridge, warm, sort of gray. But it fills you up, and that's what matters. Outside, it's still snowing. You head to the well, ice crunching underfoot, your breath rising like a dragon's. The well bucket's frozen to the edge. You chip it free with the back of a hatchet. Water hauls are no joke. Slippery paths, heavy buckets, and hands that go numb halfway back. That modern luxury of hot water on tap? Forget it. You warm your water the same way you warm yourself, over fire and effort. Inside again, your family's stirring. Some are layering on clothes, others are still huddled by the hearth. Grandma's muttering about her toes. You check her feet, blue. You rub them between your hands, trying to coax some life back in. She swats you for fussing, but doesn't say no. And here's something weird. Some peasants believed in something called second sleep. After waking up super early, they'd stay awake for an hour or two, tending fire, talking quietly, maybe even praying, before drifting back for another round. Sort of like medieval snoozing minus the alarm clock. Historians still argue whether second sleep was a universal habit or just something mentioned in a few isolated records. But if it was a thing, it probably made sense in a freezing world. Get up, keep the fire alive, make sure no one's frostbitten, then slide back into the warmest spot you can find. Even during daytime, you don't really escape the cold. There's no central heating, no cozy tavern unless you're rich. Your work, farming, animal care, gathering firewood, happens outdoors where the cold is less a temperature and more a lifestyle. But at night, that's when it gets mean. You shut every wooden shutter, stuff rags into the doorframe, and lay extra straw around the base of the walls. Every tiny crack becomes a portal to misery. You even hang old cloaks over the windows. Fabric as insulation, medieval edition. Now here's your mainstream fact. Wool was the winter MVP. It insulates even when damp, which matters when everything is damp all the time. Spun on drop spindles or great wheels, woven into thick, heavy cloth, and passed down through generations, wool cloaks were prized, patched, and worn into the ground. If you had one, you guarded it like treasure. And yes, you even shared it. Because that's another secret of surviving cold nights. Closeness. You didn't suffer alone, whether in bed, at the hearth, or gathered around the only pot of stew. Warmth came from people. At bedtime, you strip off the outermost layer, maybe. You climb back into the communal bed, now damp from breath and sweat and who knows what. You curl up into yourself, press your feet into your siblings' legs, and sigh into your sleeve. The fire crackles, low and slow. Someone farts. You all pretend not to notice. Outside, the wind howls like something ancient and angry. But inside, for now, you're safe. Sort of. The night will be long, but you've made it through another day. You wake with a rumbling belly again. Winter hunger isn't just an inconvenience, it's a season-long gnawing ache that creeps in like frost under a door and refuses to leave. Your body feels hollow, like a pot long since scraped clean. Food, or the lack of it, is the silent enemy of the coldest months. You stretch, joints cracking like old wood, and glance at the hearth. Nothing cooking. Not yet. It's too early and too empty. So you dig into the storage. You remember what you managed to set aside from autumn. There's a basket of turnips, a string of dried onions, and a lump of something that used to be cheese, now more green than yellow. You give it a sniff. Questionable. You eat it anyway. In the world of medieval peasant cuisine, survival is the flavor of the month. You rely heavily on grains, root vegetables, dried legumes. The bread, coarse dark rye, dense enough to bruise a shin, and sometimes mixed with bits of bark or ground peas to make it stretch. Not a joke. Wood bark as filler was a real thing. And if you're feeling fancy today, there's pottage, a thick stew of whatever's on hand, ladled from the same pot, day after day, with new scraps added over time. You don't empty the pot, you just evolve it. Every meal is more ritual than pleasure. Breakfast is cold, lunch is hot if you're home, and dinner is whatever scraps remain. There's no snacking, no sweets, and certainly no cheat days. You dream of fresh eggs, but the hens stopped laying weeks ago. Chickens are daylight-sensitive creatures. With long nights and short, cloudy days, they're basically on strike. You mutter something uncharitable under your breath and check anyway. One egg, small, worth more than silver, emotionally speaking. You break it into the pot with a little water, a turnip slice or two, maybe a crust of bread to thicken it up. That's dinner for 5. The youngest gets the yolk. Grandma gets the broth. You get what's left at the bottom. You remember the harvest festivals of autumn, full bellies, fresh bread, even roasted meats if the village had a pig to spare. But now you're deep in the hunger gap, the brutal weeks between the last harvest's end and the first signs of spring. You can't plant yet. You can't forage. Your diet narrows to what you dried, buried, smoked, or pickled. Salted herring? If you live near a port. Otherwise, nope. Dried beans. If you had enough to store and weren't taxed to oblivion by your lord. Sometimes you trap rabbits. But mostly, you don't. Now here's your quirky tidbit. In some places, peasants actually ate cats. Not as a delicacy, not even as a main dish, but as a what else is there emergency option. Yep, your snuggly mouse hunter might also be Tuesday's stew. But don't worry, that was rare and often illegal. Still, desperate times. There's a rustling outside. You grab your stick, your just-in-case weapon. Probably nothing. But maybe a fox, maybe even a squirrel. And if it is, congratulations, that's meat. Not much, but enough to float your pottage from watery misery to actually savory. You haven't had real meat in weeks. The village pig was slaughtered back in December, every part used. Even the blood became pudding, nothing wasted. That's how it works. Even the bones are boiled again, and yes, again. You chase the noise, and miracle of miracles, it's a squirrel. You catch it, barely, and bring it inside. Your little brother cheers like you've slain a dragon. You skin it with shaking hands, toss the meat into the pot, and bury the rest. The pot simmers over the coals, a slow bubble of scent and heat. For a moment, the room feels full of food, of purpose, of hope. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Most peasants didn't eat meat regularly. Meat was reserved for holidays or for those who could hunt, usually nobility. In fact, many laws prohibited commoners from hunting game at all. Killing the Lord's deer could cost you your hand, or worse. So when peasants did eat meat, it was scavenged, snared in secret, or gifted during church festivals. Your neighbors stop by. One offers a handful of dried beans in exchange for a ladle of squirrel stew. Fair trade. Another brings an old carrot. The pot grows. And so does the circle around it. Food, like warmth, draws people together. Even when there's not enough, you share. Because not sharing means someone might not survive. And that someone might be you next time. You remember last year's famine? That one bitter February where 3 families starved just a mile down the road. One mother boiled her shoe. Another disappeared into the forest and never came back. You don't talk about it, but it's there, under every spoonful, this unspoken pact of survival. Historians still argue whether medieval peasants were chronically malnourished or just seasonally starved. Some records show strong, hardy laborers. Others suggest high mortality and stunted growth. Truth is, it depended on your harvest, your landlord, your neighbors, and pure dumb luck. As the pot empties and the fire dims, you scrape the sides clean with crusty bread. The baby is asleep, mouth open. Your father is snoring. Grandma is muttering again, something about snow in May. You're full, not stuffed, not satisfied, but full enough to last until morning. You rinse the pot with a little snow, toss it back on the hearth for tomorrow. You place the last crust of bread on the mantel, wrapped in cloth. A guardian, a promise, maybe a wish. Outside, the wind moans like a forgotten song. Your stomach, for once, is quiet. You pull your cloak tighter and sink back into the straw. Your breath fogs the air. You close your eyes. You dream, not of feasts or riches, but of one warm spring day. Just one.